Welcome to episode 38. This week's guest is Kristina Kotlus. She is the author of the book, I Quit, Facing Cancer with Faith, Family, and Friends, and Sarcasm. There's a lot of that, too. I think you can tell by the title alone of her book, you are going to love Kristina. I actually was familiar with Kristina, but I knew her by the handle Prince William Moms. If you're from the Northern Virginia area, actually PWC Moms, she runs the Facebook page, which is all events in the area for people with families. So if you do have children and you're in the Northern Virginia area, be sure to follow her on Facebook, PWC Moms. But I got to know her, as I said, through her book, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. And so on our chat today, Kristina was diagnosed twice with brain cancer. And so her book kind of goes into that journey, but we really got to talk about, beyond that journey, where she is now. And for me, what really stood out was finding joy no matter what the circumstances are. And that's so important. We recorded this before the coronavirus really affected our area and completely changed how we live our life. And I'm so grateful for the conversation and even more grateful that she got to join me in studio. And I just think it's such a wonderful perspective that everyone can take away, whether you're facing something like cancer or just anything in our life, because at the end of the day, we do not have control. And so join Kristina and I as we chat. And as I told her in the episode, I definitely want to have her back. So I hope you enjoy, and let's get ready to flesh it out.
Coming to you from the M&M Exterior Studio in Nooksville, Virginia, this is Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle, the introvert's extrovert. She talks to people so you don't have to. For now.
Welcome back to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. I am here with my guest, Kristina Kotlus.
Thanks for having me.
Did I say it right?
You did.
Yay!
Good job.
See, I always need that affirmation.
Here for you.
Now, you might recognize Kristina's handle name, Prince William County Moms.
Yes, the notorious.
The notorious.
Yeah.
If you are a mom in Prince William County over the last, what did you say, 12?
I feel like it's been, a long time.
A long time. Then you know her because I followed you. And I was excited when you reached out to be on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited. I followed some of your journey. And so part of that is you wrote a book called I Quit, Facing Cancer with Faith, Family, and Friends. And my favorite line, and sarcasm. There's a lot of that too.
Yep. Just keeping it real.
I love that. So I'm excited to talk with you today.
I'm excited to talk too.
I've
got my coffee. We have.
We full disclosure, we were chitty-chatting, but we decided let's jump in and make this the real deal. So why don't you tell me about you? That's always the hardest question.
So I am a Prince William County lifer. We don't have a lot of those. We have a lot of military families.
We got my husband over there. Yep. I'm the military one and he's the lifer. Yeah.
So I grew up in Prince William County, went away for college for a little bit, was so excited to go to New England where I thought it was going to snow and it was going to be beautiful, and realized that I like Virginia snow where it comes down and it's pretty and then it goes away.
Goes away. You don't live with it for months.
And so I came back down here, graduated from George Mason University. I have a degree in comparative religious studies, and I was a children's minister for a little while before we started homeschooling our kids. And I've been doing that for the last many years, in addition to running my blog. And I also worked for a long time for our state delegate until he lost re-election a couple years ago, doing his community outreach. So I like to say I'm kind of a community cheerleader. So
yeah, that's accurate. I would say that's a great description.
Yeah, so I just really like being here and helping people to feel connected to the people around them, especially because we do have such a military heavy area where people are coming in and coming out, and I like to help them feel connected with the people around them. So my kids now are 12, about to turn 14 and 16. So I am right in the thick of teaching a kid how to drive. which they don't put in the baby books. Like the colic is bad, but I went to the dentist in October and the dentist was like, I feel like you're getting some TMJ, like you're clenching your jaw a lot. And I was like, no, my kid got his learner's permit. And he was like, oh, that tracks. Like, we're good.
Yeah. Yep. So, you always have to know the whole story before you kind of go in for that diagnosis.
Yeah, no, I just am teaching someone to drive. So that's, I mean, the short version.
Yeah. It's funny because in my mind, your kids are still very young.
Yes.
Because of how I quote, knew you.
Yeah.
Through Prince William County Moms, that it's like, wait, you have teenagers now?
I know.
What?
I know.
How is that
crazy.
possible?
It's very crazy. And I was young when I got married and had my kids. I was 19. So I had my oldest son, when I was a sophomore in college, and I had my middle son when I was a senior in college. And so I will be 42 when my kids leave. And I will have to, figure out what I want to be when I grow up.
Yeah.
So.
And you have so much, mom time under your belt.
Yeah.
But now you've got this next phase that you guys are quickly approaching.
We are. So. Yeah. My oldest actually will, since we homeschool, we have a little bit more flexibility in how things work. And so he'll actually start at Nova next year. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll already have one out. Kind of. I mean, he'll still be at home and everything, but...
You don't have to homeschool him, though. You don't have to be responsible
I know.
for that,
I can just, eat bonbons and watch The
Your
Office.
life will be so easy.
Yeah.
So easy. All
so
your
easy.
problems just gone. So now you wrote this book. Do you want to give people a little bit of background about your book?
Sure. So I have been diagnosed twice with brain cancer. Once in 2013. It was in the back part of my head. It's called the posterior fossa, if you want to use the fancy doctor speak. And I had 16 hours of brain surgery, and we followed that up with 6 weeks of radiation. And I was supposed to have kind of bought myself, the guess was 7 to 10 years before it came back.
Okay.
And so that's like a small weapons charge. So I was doing 7 to 10 for ependymoma. And
Doing your time.
doing my time. So we always knew it was going to come back.
Okay.
It was a when, not an if. And unfortunately, we didn't get quite that much. And it was probably actually a little bit sooner that it came back. But my insurance company had decided I did not need spine MRIs. And I ended up having to be a little bit nefarious about how I got my spine MRI because my legs were starting to go numb. And so I knew something was wrong. But I did eventually get it, and I was re-diagnosed in 2017 with leptomeningeal metastases, which just means there's some junk that dropped down into your spinal cord. And we did 6 weeks of radiation again and chemotherapy with that. And then I did a full year of daily chemotherapy to try and clear everything up. And so the book is kind of a combination of here's what we dealt with and here's how we got through it. And so it's more there is the cancer memoir aspect of it because I think those stories can really help other people that are going through it. But it's really more of a if you're going through a divorce, I wrote this for you because I want you to be able to have hope and joy. And if you have any kind of cancer, I wrote this for you because I want you to be able to have hope and joy. And so whatever your situation is, the message is really about choosing joy in your situation, no matter what your circumstances are.
I love that.
Yeah.
Because we talked earlier, it's about kind of being sick of talking about cancer, right?
Yeah.
And it's and I think that when you're going through a hard time, it's I just don't want to talk about the thing anymore. So I love that it's so universal because finding joy in the midst of pain, I feel has been, at least for me lately, a message I'm receiving. I can't think how to say it, but lesson.
That's a lesson that is being provided to you.
Yes. So the fact that you even just said that, I was yes. And I saw a great quote the other day, which was that your story will be someone's survival guide one day.
Yes.
And so I love that you described it like it. Yeah. And it's something that you can get from anyone because, have you heard of the term? I don't know if this necessarily fits, but it's like the inspirational porn where it's someone's story and you're you get all lifted up because it's oh, well, my life isn't like theirs. So I need to be better or it makes me feel better.
Oh my gosh, this is why I watch Dr. Phil. Like, I have not heard that term.
Oh, yeah.
But I literally, if I'm having a really bad, like, mom day, I will turn on Dr. Phil and be like, my kids are not addicted to meth. Like, I'm doing so much better than I thought I was.
So much better, yes.
Which is bad. Like, I should not do that, but.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily bad. The inspirational part, it kind of deals more with, like, people with disabilities. And it kind of, it puts them, like, it makes
they become an object.
Yes.
And I'm very against that.
Exactly. And I feel like with certain, like, it's easy to be like, oh, she went through this, so therefore my problems aren't as bad.
Yeah. And one thing I tell people all the time is that I am not trying to win the suffering Olympics.
Exactly.
I do not want the gold medal in the suffering Olympics. And that was something I actually said to friends a lot when I was going through treatment, because they'd be like, oh, all the kids have strep throat this week, but I can't talk to you about that. No, we can talk about that. Like, I've had strep throat before. It sucks. Like, it's okay for us to still have life together. I'm not trying to win the suffering Olympics. You don't have to qualify your suffering against my suffering.
Yes. Thank you for saying that, because I couldn't think, I may not have used the right example, but that's what I was trying to get to, was like, I love how we all need to figure out how to find joy in the pain.
Yeah.
And so by you walking through that, I think that's just a message that we all need to hear. And Susan McCorkindale, she was on a few weeks ago on the podcast, and I can't remember if we talked about it on the pod. I think we did, about building. She's very big on building resiliency before you need it.
And that's one of the things I talk about, is building joy as a spiritual discipline. And
Can you dig into that more?
So spiritual disciplines are things that you practice, right? So fasting and prayer and reading scripture, and there's a bunch of them. But I talk about joy as a spiritual discipline because it's just like anything else that you have to discipline yourself to do, like sit-ups, right? You can't just go do 400 sit-ups. You have to discipline yourself to do some every night and kind of build up your tolerance for sit-ups. Like, not me, because I obviously am not a sit-up person. But
maybe I will be. I don't know.
Probably not. I'm just trying to work on the inside first, know.
Same girl.
With joy, you can't ignore the joy in your life and then come into the darkest period you're going to enter and be like, I need the joy to be here now. You have to practice that. And so one of the things that we did with our kids was we actually had a blessing journal, and we wrote in that sucker every day.
Before?
We actually started with my second diagnosis.
Okay.
The practice of doing that.
Okay.
Because with my first diagnosis, I actually had like this supernatural peace about the whole thing. And I just felt very confident that God was going to carry it, and it was going to be okay. And that didn't necessarily mean I was going to survive everything. Yeah. I just felt like if I died, if I had deficits, if I whatever, like, God was going to handle it, and it was going to be okay. And like, there was a reason this was happening. There was a purpose. There was a story. And I just had this great peace. And with my second diagnosis, I was not okay. And I think that's a really important thing. Like, side note, you are not a bad Christian or a bad person or trying hard enough if you need to take a little bit of like chemical assistance to feel better.
Preach.
And so I actually was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder with my second diagnosis, which is not uncommon for cancer patients. And it's okay. Like, you don't need to be able to pray yourself better, believe yourself better. Like, there is medicine.
And I'm glad you said that too, but like with the faith piece, is that if you are struggling, it doesn't mean your faith isn't
Girl, go get some Zoloft.
Yes.
They should put it in the water. Like,
yes, we'd all benefit.
I think Congress would get better. Like,
there's a lot
Zoloft for everyone.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's a campaign slogan. Holding it up.
They're not paying me, but they should.
They're not a sponsor.
They're not a sponsor. So I had all this joy before, and I was very easily able to see all the blessings in my life. And then it got hard, and I was like, no, like, I'm not going to give up on this. We're going to fight for that. Yeah. And so every day we would write. And what we were really doing was establishing like a pattern of evidence where we could look back at the good days.
I love that. The pattern of evidence.
Yeah.
Oh,
so we have a
good
book. And what we were doing was creating, like, for our kids, like, if there's a bad day, if something happens to me, if something happens to, my husband, like, not that he was sick, but, hit by a bus, whatever.
That's the thing. Any of us.
We have this book that shows like everything God has done for us. And that was so important. And we did it on the bad days and we did it on the good days. And your kids are so much better at this than you, especially if they're little.
Yeah.
So like my daughter would be like, I saw a cloud that looks like a unicorn today. And like, great, we're going to write that down in the book. With the bad days, like when we had bad days where everyone, because sometimes you're grumpy, sometimes whatever. Yeah. And we would just use kind of the question to start off with, if you only had tomorrow what you saw as a blessing from God today, what would you want to have tomorrow? So if only the things you thanked God for today were the things you had tomorrow, like what would you want to have tomorrow? And so, there's a lot of days where it would be like, I guess my family, like,
I guess,
but like only some of you, because my brother's really getting on my nerves, but it was a practice. And I got so obnoxious on Facebook. I became that person that posts the same thing every day. But I was like, these are my blessings today. What are your blessings? Like, and on days when it was really hard for me, because there's only so many months you can be on chemo before you're just tired. I mean, just tired. And on those days, I'd be like, okay, I want everyone else to like play this game with me. Tell me what blessed you today. Like I'm gonna take some of your joy and use it for myself. And I just made it a practice. And practicing that joy, disciplining myself to see joy has helped tremendously. And it's something that my kids do and look for now. And it's something that we've just programmed into ourselves. And so I really believe in that for people and for fighting fear with faith and for fighting anxiety with joy and also with medication where necessary.
I love everything about that because it reminds me with working back in my day a lot about positive mindset. And a lot of times people, we were talking about this before we started recording, but about different personality types and that sometimes people use it as a crutch of like, well, that's just not me. I'm a half glass empty kind of person. But the crazy thing is that we can actually rewire our brains.
We can.
And so, but it's the how. And I love that you just described the how, like with the blessing journal. And no matter if you're faith-based or not, it's like finding the joy and the gratitude. It's like there's something there. And I think it's that rewiring, literally rewiring of your brain.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, yeah. So Jeremy just pointed out the joy versus happiness, because a lot of times I think just people just equate joy to being happy, and it's two different things.
Well, and for me, happiness is a reaction. So like if someone hands me a cupcake, I'm going to be happy. Like for a second. Joy is a choice.
Yes.
And I can choose joy even if everything around me is falling apart. And sometimes that takes a little bit of me being like a 2-year-old and being like, no, I'm going to be happy, dang it, and you can't stop me. And
I love how you said you have to fight for it, because
you do.
We talked before about not liking to use words with cancers like battle, fighting.
No.
And it's like when you move those words to things like fighting for joy, like that's the thing I'm going to fight for.
Yeah, because I really do dislike that terminology because I think, I mean, if you are in the middle of a cancer diagnosis right now and the term warrior makes you feel empowered, like good for you.
Yeah, go for it.
Like vaya con Dios. But for me, making it be the responsibility of the person with cancer to fight harder or like to want it more, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. There is no one that has ever died from cancer because they just didn't want to live for their kids.
Yep.
And so I just reject that whole mentality. And if you have people doing that in your life right now, I just want to like give you permission to tell them to shut up. So if you've been waiting for that, like if you're listening right now and be like, I needed someone to say that to me, you can tell them to stop talking. Like, and if you need them to call me and I will tell them, like, that's not a problem.
Or they can get your book and then they can read it. So
there's actually a whole chapter in my book called My Friend Has Cancer and I Don't Want to Suck, a general guide. And I probably wrote it for you, Karen.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. That's great. I love that because like you said, if it works for you, if it empowers you, go for it. But I love the perspective because either if you're going through it, you give them permission that if it's not jiving with them.
If it's not serving you, belay it. Yeah.
Yes. And then also just to be mindful too, because we think about what kind of what are we putting on people? I mean, you then don't want to take this on and like drive yourself crazy with anxiety about saying the wrong thing to someone. But I think it's just good. This is why communicating is so good.
Well, and I think it's good too to listen to what the person in the situation is saying. So if you're trying to support someone, whether it's, divorce or a child's diagnosis at school or, cancer or whatever, listen to what the person is saying. Yes. And be the friend that supports their mentality. I think that's really important.
I love that. And it makes me think of this book that I think Jeremy had read, or it's called Don't Sing Songs to a Broken Heart.
Heavy.
Don't Sing Songs to a Heavy Heart. I didn't read it, but I saw the cover, so therefore I'm pretty much an expert in it. But if I remember correctly what we talked about with it, it's like, when someone's going through a hard time, when you walk in there like, being all positive when they're really broken, you need to meet them where they're at.
You do.
And I love what you said about kind of watching them. And it goes back to the whole mirroring thing. I mean, that's like, it could be a sales technique, but it's a genuine thing. It can also be a very genuine, blessed thing you can do for someone as you see what they're getting. You meet them where you're at, and then you can be that little guiding light, but that's appropriate for where they're at.
But you don't come in at a 10 when they're at a 0.
Exactly.
And so, same thing with the Blessing Journal. We actually received that as a gift from a friend that was like, here, I think this would really help you. And she didn't come in and be like, this is fantastic. And let's see what God does. Yes. I'm so excited. She came in and was like, I see where you are. Have a book. Wow. And that was so perfect. And so I think it's really important. To do that, to come into the situation. And sometimes one of my best pieces of advice is if you don't know what to say, don't. Just be with people. Genuinely be with them. And there have been a lot of times where I've had the opportunity to sit with someone kind of in that moment and just let's get the Kleenex out. Let's just do this.
That's like cursing for me. Like I was saying, I'm like, if I'm sitting with someone in the ashes, if they're angry, I will throw out some good cursing because I just feel like I don't have anything. I can't say, I don't have the words.
So let's just be angry. Yeah. I have a whole collection of cards that I send out all the time that the front of one of them that is one of my favorites just says, this sucks. And it's blank on the inside. Yep. And sometimes that is all there is to say.
That's a common one I use too.
And sometimes people are not ready for hope, and your hope seems
disingenuous.
Yeah,
totally. Totally.
And so you can't come in necessarily while a person, because there's mourning. Even if you are a person of faith, even if you have hope, even if you know better, there's still a period of mourning that happens for the life you're not going to get to have. And
that's
so even with my first diagnosis, where I got the phone call and my husband and I sat on the floor and cried. And I was like, we're going to do this for 24 hours and then we're just going to believe that God has this. And there was still that period of being upset that the next however long was not going to look the way we wanted it to look. Yeah. And I was not going to get to be the mother I wanted to be. And I was going to have to give my mother a giant basket of homeschool curriculum and be like, good luck, figure it out. Maybe read them a book. I don't know.
They'll be okay.
They'll be fine.
That's what the internet's for.
Right? Yeah. I mean, go Khan Academy. I don't know. Figure it out. But there is that period of mourning, and that is an important part of the process. And so even if you have faith, even if you have, if you're not a person of faith, but you just, I don't know, or believing the universe has good things for you, whatever it is you're doing, there's still mourning that has to happen. And you can't come into someone's mourning and be dancing through it because that just hurts.
It's like dancing on them. I've been, I think I just read this in a book I was reading, but it's been kind of on my mind. I'd love to get your perspective on it. It's the whole, it doesn't have to be either or. It can be both and. And I've been thinking about that because for my own kind of stuff, we could call it, that I dealing with is, I feel like looking back on my life, developed this positive attitude, growing up, moving around all the time, always had to look forward and kind of having this belief, and whether it's just, it's ingrained in me, whether it's faith, who knows, but this idea that everything will be okay. And sometimes I'm finding, just putting my stuff out there, is that I think sometimes I skip over some of the morning because it's like, well, I know it's going to be fine, so I'm just going to look forward. And I was talking to someone recently, and it's funny that it was in the book because someone in real life, in my personal life, had said it doesn't have to be either or, it can be both and. And so I've been kind of marinating on that whole, what does it look like to kind of have pain and joy? That's what I've been walking out. And that's why I love that your book and you're talking about that.
That's a really good perspective to have. And one of the things that I tell people all the time, kind of going back to fighting the things that you should fight. I did not fight the cancer. I mean, I showed up to every appointment. I did all the things the doctors told me to do, but I was not like the warrior versus my tumor. But I did fight fear. And I think that I had all this hope. I had all this joy. And like in a very nonsensical way. I mean, I had already done this once and seen the tremendous blessings that came out of it. Like I should have had sufficient faith to kind of get through the second one. But instead I was, if you're a Bible reader, there's a story of Hezekiah who like curls up on his bed because he finds out he's going to die. And he's like, God, I just want 15 more years. Like, can you do something for me? And I remember doing that, like just curling up in a ball and being like, I really just don't want to die right now.
Yeah.
And not having the belief that I had any more in my like spiritual bank account. Like I had gotten all the grace I was going to get. I had gotten all of the hope I had like been doled out. And that's just not a thing. Like if you're a person of faith, our God is infinite. And so there was infinitely more mercy and grace available to me. But there was still that in my head, and I had to fight that. And one of the things that I tell people to do is I would literally go in my bathroom, close the door, and set a timer on my iPhone. And I would have all the bad thoughts. Like, just bring them on. Like, we're going to have a fight right now. Have you ever done that with your husband? Like, you go upstairs in your room and you shut the door and you're like, let's just do this. So I would... He's not making a face that is indicating that that's something that happens in your house. Occasionally in my house that happens.
No.
This is why the kids think we fight all the time.
Yeah. You're always going upstairs and shutting the door.
But we'll sometimes, like, if we're kind of like...
That's not for fighting.
If we're sometimes kind of sandpapering each other all day, I'll be like, let's just go upstairs and, like, do this. Whatever's, like, behind this, let's just get it over with.
That's totally... I'm like, I can't do this whole, like... underlying tension. Like, let's just...
And it's exhausting.
The kids go to bed.
Especially with fear. Like, sometimes you're trying to fight the fear off so much all day that it's just exhausting. And so I would just go upstairs and be like, let's just do this thing. I would set a timer because I'm not going to wallow in it forever.
Love that.
And I would just have all the bad thoughts. Like, my kids are going to grow up like a Disney movie without a mom. My husband's going to marry someone prettier than me and the kids are going to like her better. Like, all the things.
All the things.
And I would cry with snot bubbles. Like, I just really go deep into it.
Yes.
And then when my timer went off, I would splash some water on my face and I would be like, okay, I heard you. I'm choosing not to believe you, but I have heard you.
The lies.
I've heard you.
Yes.
And like, even some of them, like, you're going to die. That is a possibility. Like, and we're all going to die
and
one
we
day.
all are. I mean, that's what's so crazy is that we all could die today. Like, we don't like to think of that. And when you have a diagnosis, it's such, I mean, and I can't speak, I need you to speak on that, but I don't know. It's just we get so wrapped up in our heads.
But sometimes it's okay to just sit down and be like, okay, these are bad feelings that I'm having. And like, I'm just going to.
We need to acknowledge them.
I'm going to acknowledge them. And then I'm going to tell them I've heard you and I'm choosing to go in this direction instead.
Yes.
And so that was what it, like the both and looked like for me. Like sometimes I needed to sit down and have that hard conversation with my head and be like, these are all things that could happen. And I'm choosing to look over here.
We talk a lot about, we've been talking about cognitive distortions, where it's basically like the lies in your head.
Yeah.
And I have been someone who, with my close people in my life, I tend to overshare.
Okay.
But I've realized it's because I like to get the cognitive distortions out. So that you meaning, people who speak into my life, like can help me, weed them out. But I think that there's that next level, though, of needing to do it on your own, like journaling or something like that.
But
sometimes.
like what she said, it's really important to make the choice
to go
keep
the other
going.
way.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
what I mean. That's why I like putting it down and like kind of saying, okay, I see you. That's why I like how you said that. Like, I see you. I see these thoughts and like, I need to
thank you.
choose. I'm not choosing this.
Yeah. I mean, you basically have in your head like an entire storefront of options. And you get to pick the one you're going to buy and go with. And I'm not going to choose fear. Like,
Love that.
and you shouldn't either.
And if you, and I am not a doctor, I cannot give any diagnoses, but just from what I know from learning, talking to people, is that if all of this kind of these techniques and whatnot, if you cannot move forward, I think I would totally recommend seeing a therapist, a doctor, something for extracurricular help.
Go see a therapist anyway, you guys.
Yes, amen.
Whatever.
BetterHelp.com. They're not a sponsor yet, but really, if you can't go find one locally,
Yeah.
BetterHelp.com.
I mean, talk to your pastor, talk to your small group leader, like talk to a friend.
to somebody.
But it's important to make sure that the person you're talking to is a safe person. And in every situation, there are people that are not safe. And I found out very quickly. I remember sitting at Georgetown, which is where I had my surgery, my brain surgery initially. And when I came in to meet with the neurosurgeon, they looked at my MRI and were like, oh, you are not going anywhere. Like, you have so much hydrocephalus, your brain is like a balloon, and you are just going to stay here. And we finally let people know what was going on. And I had a friend that called me, and she was hysterical. And she's like, what am I going to tell my sons?
Oh my gosh.
I don't know. I mean, I had to tell my kids. I feel like you're going to be able to figure it out. Like, she didn't want to have to tell her kids that her friend's mom was sick because that would mean that she could get sick, and she didn't want to scare her children.
And she's telling you this?
She's telling me. And so there are people that will want to make your situation about them. And those are not safe people.
I was going to ask you, like, how do you know when someone's not safe? And so that was a great,
There's one example. And there are also people that, like, especially if it's medical, but like in any kind of a situation. Like, I know friends that have gone through divorce and been like, people thought I had like divorce cooties and like they wanted nothing to do with me. Those aren't safe people. You don't need them. Like, we don't need them anyway.
Yeah.
With my brain cancer stuff, there were a lot of people that just could not. It's like the movie. They couldn't handle the truth. Like, but I did have, I was very blessed to have a really good friend who, like, I don't know how she does it. Her first husband and her husband's first wife both died of brain cancer. And they are just advocates. And she's spent decades now being there for people in that same pain, which is incredible. But she was the one where I could be like, here is my actual radiology report from my last MRI. Read this with me. And it didn't scare her. And so that's a safe person. And it's interesting because the person that you're closest to in your life before whatever situation happens might not be the person that is your safe person when you're going through it. And that's okay.
And I feel like, too, I want to add about just because someone's not your safe person doesn't mean they're a bad person.
No.
Because it's like we're all on our own journeys. And so a lot of times our stuff brings up stuff in other people.
Yeah.
And so if they're not at a place to deal with it, and that's why it's like it's not about you, almost like it's the whole for us to remember. Because I feel like I would imagine, but we've all gone through stuff, and it's like you do feel sad when the person you think is going to be your safe person isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's like that mourning. There's that period of mourning, but I think remembering that it's not about you because it's their own stuff, and then praying that God or how, the universe, whichever your beliefs are, will provide. Like,
It should be God, though. But,
you're just going to say, I'm trying to whatever.
It's not my show, so I'm going to leave. You can dislike me if you want.
You can say
it's hard because for me, like, I could see all of the good things that happened in my life as coincidence or like the universe being kind to me or whatever. But when you're looking at it through the lens of your own mortality, like, I got this terrible diagnosis twice. So tell me more about how I'm going to believe that, like, good things randomly happen to me. Like, that's not a thing. It just doesn't work for my logic. So, but like, you do you. But like, if you would like me to tell you what you should do, I would be happy to do that also.
Because you are an Enneagram 8 and you want to make people's lives better.
I do.
And so you just want to get in there and fix it.
Let's just fix it.
Where, see, I was being my 2 self where I'm like, all right, everyone do you. We can talk about my stuff if you want later, but I just want everyone to feel, come on in.
My cancer could come back tomorrow. I don't have time.
Exactly.
I don't have time. ain't nobody got time for that. So
Amen. Amen.
But yeah.
But that's, I think, part of like aging where you kind of get older and you realize like, ain't got time for this.
Yeah.
And so for you, it's like a crash course in like,
yeah.
why, what am I waiting for?
Since I was 28, I've been like, I don't have time. There's no time. And the other thing too is, there's an interesting thing that happens where I was just the other day talking about this, and I've talked about it on Prince William County Moms and gotten in trouble for it, but it is still my opinion and I'm still going to have it. I think it's really important to not use people as objects. Mm-hmm. And so
we were talking about that. Yeah.
We were talking about that. The last time I talked about it, there was someone that had wanted to know where they could take their child to donate their birthday presents to homeless children and watch the children receive them. And I was like, that's not a thing. Here's why that's not a thing. Because that is you making that child into an object so that your child can feel good. You want to take that child's suffering and allow their suffering to make your child feel better.
Yes.
That's not how we treat people. People are an end unto themselves.
Yes.
And I feel very strongly about that for many reasons. I've always felt very strongly about that. And I think part of it is like Christian philosophy is kind of like if you're doing something, you don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Like you want to do it kind of in the background.
Yeah.
But also because when I was sick, we had all these people that wanted to help us, which was great.
Yeah.
But I know from my children talking about it after the fact that some people made them feel like objects. And we're still very appreciative of all the help we got and everything. But when you're telling your kids like, oh, we're taking the Kotluses dinner because their mommy can't take care of them. And like, you should be so thankful that I'm healthy because their mommy is not healthy. Then you're turning my children into an object lesson and they're people. And so I feel very strongly about that.
Can you suggest, I'm so glad you brought that up. So then can you suggest for someone who might be an overthinker like me, where what could it look like to make sure you don't do that?
I mean,
just love people would be my answer.
I think that's
like
the
my answer. Like I was like in my head, I'm like, well, you just love them. But
I mean, if you feel like you have to have a conversation with your kids about what's happening, I think it's easy to be like, everybody has hard times. We've had hard times. They're having a hard time right now. We're taking them a casserole.
Okay, good.
I just don't think you ever make it as like, well, you should be happy mommy can be at your soccer game because Savannah's mommy can't be at her soccer game because she's in the hospital. That's not a thing. And while we're preaching about things you don't do to children, I think...
Preach away.
I'm about to. Like, let's get the soapbox. Do you have one?
Step up.
And I talk about this in my book too, but like, it is... Dr. Phil, who I watch, when I'm trying to make myself feel better.
Yeah. How's that? I always use that. How's that working for you?
How's that working for you?
That's a Dr. Phil thing I got.
One of my favorite things he says is that you don't make children deal with adult problems. And there were a lot of people that, for whatever reason, felt like they should go up to my 8-year-old and be like, how's mommy? What are the doctors saying? Like... Have they decided? So one of the things we did was we went to Duke, which if you or anyone you love is having a brain cancer diagnosis, you should go to Duke. Like, you should love Jesus and you should go to Duke. Those are the things. Like,
that's your advice.
While I'm here standing on my soapbox, you should definitely go to a brain tumor center. Like, your outcomes are so much better if you go to a place that specializes in brain tumors. But Duke is amazing, and I am standing here today largely because of them.
That's great.
So after my brain surgery, we were trying to decide what we were going to do. Like, were we going to go to Duke, or were we going to stay at Georgetown, or were we going to go to like a Nova for radiation? And we hadn't decided yet, but people knew we were thinking about it and would ask my children, do you know if mommy's going to go away to North Carolina? I'm 8. I don't know. And so, first of all, don't talk to children about grown-up issues. And second of all, like, don't hound them for information. And so one of the things we had to do was to give our children permission to be rude, which is not a thing I ever thought I was going to do. Yeah. But we were like flat out, if like you're in your, little homeschool group and they're going to pray and they're like, what should we pray about for mommy? Like, has she done, if anyone makes you feel like you're going to cry, if anyone makes you feel uncomfortable, if anyone does whatever, feel free to be like, you can go talk to my grandma. Or like, I don't want to talk to you about this, or whatever you need to say to get yourself out of that situation, because we didn't realize how much pressure adults were going to put on our very small children. I mean, my daughter turned 5 while I was in the hospital. little kids.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, adults felt like they could pry them for information about my medical status. And, like, don't do that.
Yes.
So while I'm on my soapbox,
I love you being on your soapbox because this is, you know, kind of like the theme of the podcast is sometimes like you talk about the stuff that people don't talk about. And it's so easy to jump to. That's why I haven't gotten to read your book because I just got it today, but I'm excited because there's so much, like you said, of like memoirs and it's inspiration but I feel like, but the stuff that people really need to know is the how, like, how did you, you know, like, so that if I'm going through a hard time, like, please show me the way, be the light. And then like, what to not do? Because how the heck would I know what not to do unless I listened? And if you don't ever get to the real conversation with someone, like, what's your real thoughts about this? Then
I will tell you.
Good. Yes, girl.
I think that the big thing is with kids, and this is something I try to do. I had a girl over at my house the other day sharing some things, and she finished talking, and I was like, do you want me to say anything? Like, because sometimes people just want you to listen to them.
Oh, that's a good question.
And with kids, like, if you are a safe person for a kid, I think part of that is if they come up to you and they are clearly distressed, hey, do you want to talk about anything? And if they say no, believe them. Like, it is not your job to fix someone else's child that is in crisis. Unless you're, like, their therapist, in which case, like, you do whatever it is that your degree tells you to do. But if you're, like, their Sunday school teacher or their neighbor or their, like, you know, friend's mom or whatever, it's okay for you to be like, hey, is there anything you want to talk about or do you need anything? And if they say no, like, believe them. Let them know you're there, but, like, believe them. I think that's a really big thing. I think kids are a lot smarter than we give them credit for. And we definitely learned a lot. I mean, I don't want to say that I was the ideal cancer parent. Like, we messed a lot of things up. Like, we should have made sure that other adults did not know things we were thinking about before we had decided and told our kids what we were going to do.
Oh, I see.
But part of that was that we did not realize that grown-ups were going to talk to our children.
Yeah. And you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know.
So, you know.
One of the things we did right was we have 3 children. And anyone that has more than one child knows they're all very different. Mm-hmm. And we sat them down when we were going to tell them the first time about my cancer. And I say we, but that's a lie. If you're going to tell your children a very hard thing, I suggest having your husband do it so that you don't have to be involved. I just decided I was not going to be able to have that conversation with them without completely
Were you there
down.
when he talked about it, or were you not there?
I was upstairs.
Okay.
So he sat with them in the living room and talked, and then I was available upstairs for everyone to come and hug and cry and like.
Okay.
But we gave a like general statement of information, and then we let each one of them ask whatever they wanted to ask, because my older one is very like inquisitive and needs a lot of information. And he wanted to watch like brain surgeries on YouTube. He wanted to know where my neurosurgeon went to college, like what was his GPA, lots of questions. My middle guy came and crawled up on my lap and wrapped his arms around me and was like, I never want to talk about this again. Great. Let's do that. Like, you don't want to talk about it. We don't have to. He did not want to know what they were going to do to me. He didn't want to know if it was going to hurt. Like, he just wanted to curl up into a ball and be like, who is going to take care of me? That is what I want to have happen. Can I have a cupcake? Great.
Perfect.
My littlest one, bless her heart, came upstairs and was like, Mommy, I get to have a sleepover at Uncle Kevin's house. This is the most amazing thing that has ever happened. And I was so happy for her. Yes. So what happened was they kept me in the hospital for a week, and then we begged for me to be able to go home and spend a couple days with the kids. And that was when we told them, like, really what was going to happen and everything. And so at that point, we had a plan for, like, when I go in for surgery, you're going to get to go and have a sleepover at Uncle Kevin's house. And, like, such a thing had never been done before. So, like, this was the best day.
Yes.
And the other thing that we learned, and you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to tell you guys because I'm soapboxing right now. My middle son is not a hugger, and he gave this woman a hug that brought dinner to our house one day because it was Kentucky Fried Chicken and it was not touching. He was so tired of getting food that was all touching.
The casseroles.
He was my kids actually all for like I want to say 3 years after my initial like run through with cancer, I could not serve baked pasta of any kind because they had like it sounds ridiculous to say, but they had like PTSD about baked
Yes,
ziti because it just
yes.
reminded them of when I was sick.
Yeah.
So if you really want to win with like kids whose parents are sick, like roll up with some Domino's or some KFC and not a casserole, because my son was legitimately so excited that his food was not all touching.
Yes.
He hugged this woman, and I wish I could tell you what a big deal for him that was, because he doesn't hug anybody. Like, he barely hugs me. And this woman walks in with KFC, and he's like, I just love you so much.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking my language. I'm like, see, I feel like so much of sharing sharing your shit, sharing your stuff is giving people permission to like do you. Like, it's kind of needing that. And so it's like, you know what? You just pick up fast food and they will be happy. Like,
so happy. I mean, if there's a list and you can see that they've had fast food the last 6 nights,
yes,
like, you know, bring the ziti. But
yeah. Or bring a separate meal of separate things. That's actually a good thing that, once again, I feel like not as always mentioned, is that when you're bringing meals to someone, you have to look at the ages of the kids and things like that. And like, because my family, my kids eat like toddlers still.
Okay.
Like meat, veggies, fruit, like nothing with mixes, spices. That's just not their jam. And so, I, of course, love having meals because I love eating and whatnot. And so, like, they just end up eating fruits and vegetables. So they would be very, very glad to have a separate meal.
Yes.
That's funny.
That's a little funny.
Well, thank you for all your soapboxing. I loved everything. I can't wait to read your book. It's, I think sometimes we shy away from heavy stuff, but it goes back to that building resiliency no matter where you're at in your life. If you're going through a hard time, you need to know that you're not alone. And if you're not, it's like building those blocks for handling it. And I appreciate you being willing to share. And I just love your message of finding the joy in the midst of it all. So, and I think that's just so universal. And
I hope it helps.
I think it will. Well, thank you, Kristina. And if people want to find you, can they find you?
They can find me at pwcmoms.com, of course, and at KristinaKotlus.com as well.
Awesome. And we didn't talk about this because I just assumed, but I forget. If you are in Prince William County, the blog, it's a lot of the activities in the area, right, for moms to do with kids.
Yep.
So, all right, great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for now.
Thanks for listening to Flushing It Out with Samantha Spittle. Music provided by twinmusicom.org. Song titled Night at the Dance Hall. Sound editing by me, Jeremy Spittle. A special thanks to our studio sponsor, M&M Exteriors. Visit their website at mmexteriors.com for all of your roofing, siding, and gutter needs in the Northern Virginia area. Visit our website at flushingitout.com and be sure to subscribe. This has been a Spitfire production.
That was the greatest thing I've ever heard.
Don't forget to check out the after show on the Full Flush bonus episode, where Samantha and I continue the conversation with our guest. You can find the Full Flush episode right here on Flushing It Out every Friday.